The rain drummed steadily against Officer Lee Mina's patrol car windshield as she navigated the empty downtown streets. It was nearly midnight, and the city had settled into that peaceful quiet she had grown to love during her 12 years on. The Force, her radio had been silent for the past hour until it suddenly crackled to life with static. Unit 7. We have reports of unusual sounds coming from behind Seoul General Medical Center. Possible disturbance or injured animal? Can you check it? Out. Mina grabbed her radio and responded. Copy that. Dispatch, en route to Seoul General. As she pulled into the medical center's parking lot, everything seemed normal. The building's windows glowed softly with the usual night lighting, and the emergency entrance buzzed with its typical late-night activity. But something felt different tonight. The air itself seemed to hum with an energy she couldn't explain. Following the reported location, Mina made her way round to the back of the building where the service entrances and dumpsters were located. The alley was darker than usual. With one of the overhead lights flickering erratically, she pulled out her heavy-duty flashlight and began scanning the area methodically dotted first. She heard it too, a strange, almost musical humming sound that seemed to pulse rhythmically. It wasn't coming from any machinery she recognized. As she moved deeper into the alley, her flashlight beam caught something that made her freeze completely. Near a cluster of medical waste containers, something was glowing, not reflecting light, but actually emitting a soft, blue luminescence that pulsed like a heartbeat. Mina approached cautiously, her hand instinctively moving to her service weapon. Though she couldn't imagine what threat a glowing object might pose, when she got closer, her heart nearly stopped. It wasn't just any object. It was a bundle of fabric, but unlike any material she had ever seen, the cloth appeared to be woven with threads of actual light, creating patterns that shifted and moved like liquid mercury. The blue glow emanated from within the fabric itself, and as she watched, the pulsing seemed to be getting weaker. With trembling hands, Mina carefully peeled back the strange material. Inside was a newborn baby, barely the size of her forearm, with skin so dark it seemed to absorb the surrounding light. But what made her gasp audibly were the markings covering the infant's tiny body, geometric. Patterns that looked like intricate circuit boards ran along his arms, chest, and forehead in lines of silver that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. The baby was barely breathing, his tiny chest rising and falling in shallow, rapid movements. But strangest of all, when Mina's flashlight beam hit those geometric markings, they seemed to respond, glowing faintly as if powered by some internal energy source. Every piece of training told her to secure the scene, call for backup, and wait for the proper authorities. But as she looked down at this impossibly small life fighting to survive, something deeper than protocol kicked in. This child needed help immediately, and she was the only one here to provide it. Wrapping the baby carefully in her own jacket, while keeping the strange metallic fabric round him, Mina ran back to her patrol car. She radioed dispatch as she drove. "This is Unit 7. I have a medical emergency. Newborn infant in critical condition. I'm transporting directly to..." So, General Emergency Room. The emergency room erupted in tick-controlled chaos when Mina burst through the doors carrying the tiny bundle. Dr. Kim Hyun-woo, the senior physician on duty, took one look at the baby and immediately called for the pediatric intensive care team. "Where did you find him?" Dr. Kim asked as they rushed toward the treatment room. "Behind the building, in the alley," Mina replied, still catching her breath. "He was wrapped in this strange fabric." Dr. Kim paused when he saw the metallic material, his eyes widening at its unusual properties. But there was no time to investigate. The baby's vital signs were dangerously weak. For the next 6 hours, Mina sat in the waiting room, and able to leave despite her shift ending hours ago. Something about this child had touched her heart in a way she couldn't explain. When Dr. Kim finally emerged, his expression was one of amazed confusion. "This is the most remarkable case I've ever seen," he said, sitting down beside her. "When you brought him in, that baby was maybe minutes from death. But over the past few hours, his recovery has been extraordinary. His cellular regeneration rate is unlike anything in medical literature. Those markings on his skin appear to be some kind of bioluminescent tissue we've never encountered before." Over the following weeks, Mina found herself visiting the hospital every day after her shifts. The baby, who the staff had temporarily named Baby Doe, continued to defy medical expectations. He grew stronger and healthier at an accelerated rate. That amazed the doctors. More intriguingly, those geometric patterns on his skin seemed to pulse more brightly whenever Mina was near, as if responding to her presence. Social services searched extensively for any family or explanation for how the child ended up in that alley, but no missing persons reports matched, and no hospital had any record of recent births fitting his description. The mysterious metallic fabric had been sent to various laboratories, but none could identify its composition or origin. When the foster care system proved overwhelmed and unable to provide immediate placement, Mina made a decision that surprised even herself. She had never considered having children, her career always taking priority. But something about this extraordinary child called to her maternal instincts she didn't know existed. The adoption process was complicated by the unusual circumstances of his discovery, but Mina's clean record and stable income as a veteran officer worked in her favor. 3 months after finding him in that alley, she officially became his mother, naming him Pa Ji-hoon, a name meaning bright and talented, as she carried her new son home for the first time. Those strange markings on his skin glowed softly, and Mina could have sworn she saw what looked like tiny stars twinkling within those geometric patterns. She had no idea that the child she had saved would one day save all of humanity, or that his true origins lay among those very stars that seemed to dance across his skin. 5 years had passed since Mina brought baby Ji-hoon home, and watching him grow had been the greatest joy of her life. But even she couldn't ignore that her son was far from ordinary. While other kindergarteners struggled with basic addition, Ji-hoon was solving multiplication problems in his head when his teacher, Ms. Park Soo-jin, showed the class a broken computer. Ji-hoon walked over and somehow fixed it just by touching the screen, his geometric markings glowing faintly under his sleeves. "He just has a gift," Mina would tell concerned teachers and neighbors. Deep down, she wondered if there was more to it. By 88, Ji-hoon's abilities had become impossible to hide. During a school field trip to the Science Museum, he corrected the tour guide about quantum physics, explaining concepts that even the museum's scientists struggled with. His classmates thought it was cool, but the adults exchanged worried glances. The real shock came during a soccer game when Ji-hoon was 10. He was playing defense when an aggressive player from the opposing team slid into him with cleats up, leaving a deep gash on his shin that required immediate medical attention. Mina rushed onto the field, expecting to see her son crying and bleeding heavily. Instead, she found Ji-hoon sitting calmly on the grass, examining his leg with scientific curiosity. The wound that had been gushing blood moments before was already beginning to close. Within an hour, only a faint silver line remained where the cut had been, and by the next morning, even that had disappeared completely. "Mom, why don't other kids heal like this?" Ji-hoon asked that night as Mina tucked him into bed. "Everyone is different, sweetheart," she replied, though her heart was racing. "Some people are just special." What worried Mina most were the dreams. Almost every night, Ji-hoon would wake up gasping, his markings glowing brightly in the darkness of his room. He described visions that seemed far too detailed and complex for a child's imagination. "I see these huge ships, Mom," he would whisper, curled up next to her on the couch after another nightmare. "They're not like the spaceships in movies. They're alive somehow, with surfaces that breathe and pulse like skin. And there are these beings inside them with long, thin faces and eyes that look like galaxies. They're always searching for something, or someone." The beings in his dream spoke in clicking musical languages that somehow made perfect sense to him. They showed him star maps of distant galaxies, explained technologies beyond human understanding, and repeatedly mentioned something called the convergence, though Ji-hoon could never remember. At that meant when he woke up. Minna had retired from the police force when Ji-hoon turned 12, wanting to focus entirely on raising her extraordinary son. She used her savings to hire private tutors when his regular school could no longer challenge him. Academically, math professors from Seoul National University would visit their modest apartment, amazed to find themselves being taught by a teenager who understood theoretical physics concepts that took them years to grasp. Dr. Lee Chang-ho, a quantum physicist, became a regular visitor. "I've never seen anything like it," he told Minna privately. "Ji-hoon doesn't just memorize formulas. He seems to understand the fundamental nature of reality itself. When I show him equations, he can predict the outcomes before we even run the calculations." But it wasn't just academics. Ji-hoon could fix any electronic device simply by holding it. Broken smartphones, crashed computers, even the apartment buildings, faulty elevator. Everything responded to his touch. The geometric patterns on his skin would glow softly whenever he worked with technology, as if he was communicating with the machines in some invisible language. The neighbors started calling him the miracle boy, and while most were kind, some began to whisper about unnatural things. Minna tried to shield Ji-hoon from the suspicious looks and hushed conversations, but she could see it affected him. "I wish I was normal," he confided to her one evening as they watched the stars from their balcony. "The other kids at the academy are scared of me now. They think I'm some kind of freak." "You're not a freak," Minna said firmly, pulling him close. "You're my son, and you're perfect exactly as you are." Everything changed when Ji-hoon turned 16. It started with a phone call from someone claiming to represent a government education initiative or exceptionally gifted students. Within a week, 2 men in identical black suits appeared at their door. Mrs. Park, said the taller one, who introduced himself as Agent Kim. "We've been monitoring your son's remarkable abilities. We'd like to offer him a place in our advanced program." The men looked ordinary enough, but something about them made Mina's police instincts scream danger. Their movements were too precise, their smiles too perfect, and when they spoke, their words had a strange, almost hypnotic quality. "What kind of program?" Mina asked suspiciously. "Think of it as a boarding school for children with special talents," explained the second agent. "We help them understand and control their gifts while preparing them for important roles in society." Ji-hoon, curious about meeting others like himself, agreed to attend their weekend sessions. But after each visit, he would return home exhausted and confused, with gaps in his memory about what had happened. "They run these tests," he told Minna weekly after his third session. "They hook me up to machines and ask me to solve problems while they monitor my brain activity. But whenever I try to remember the specific questions, my mind goes blank." The sessions became more frequent, and the agents more insistent. They assured Minna that everything was for Ji-hoon's benefit, that they were helping him reach his full potential. But she noticed that after each visit, the geometric markings on his skin seemed dimmer, as if something was being drained from him. One night, Mina found Ji-hoon sitting on his bed, staring at his hands with a lost expression. "Mom," he said quietly, "I had the dream again. But this time it was different. The beings in the ships weren't searching anymore. They were celebrating, like they had found what they were looking for. And when I looked at the star map they showed me, I recognized one of the planets." "Which one?" Mina asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Earth, Mom." "They were looking at Earth, and they seemed very happy about finding it." As the agents' visits became more demanding and Ji-hoon's condition grew worse, Mina realized that her son's extraordinary abilities might not be the blessing she had once thought. Something was happening to him. Something connected to those strange dreams and the mysterious circumstances of his discovery 18 years ago. She had saved him once from that alley behind the hospital. Now, she feared she might need to save him again. But this time, she wasn't sure from what, or if she even could doubt the morning of Ji-hoon's 18th birthday started like any other, with Mina preparing his favorite breakfast of kimchi fried rice and seaweed soup. But as they sat down to eat, the doorbell rang with an urgency that made both of them freeze. It wasn't the usual delivery pattern. This was 3 short rings, followed by 2 long ones, then 3 short again. "Are you expecting someone?" Ji-hoon asked. Noticing how his mother's face had gone pale, Mina shook her head slowly. In her years as a police officer, she had learned to trust her instincts. And right now every instinct was screaming danger. She approached the door cautiously and peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty. When she opened the door, there was no one there, just a small black package sitting on their doormat. It was perfectly cube-shaped, made of the same strange metallic material she remembered from the night she found Ji-hoon. The package seemed to pulse with its own inner light, and when she touched it, the geometric patterns on Ji-hoon's arms began to glow in response. "Mom, what is that thing?" Ji-hoon asked, backing away as the package started to emit a low humming sound. Before Mina could answer, the cube suddenly unfolded like a complex origami flower, revealing a crystalline device in its center. The crystal began to project a 3-dimensional hologram that filled their entire living room with blue light. The figure that appeared was a woman in her 40s, with short black hair and intense eyes that seemed to look directly at them despite being just a projection. She wore strange armor that looked like it was grown rather than manufactured, with organic curves and surfaces that shifted color as she moved. "Officer Limina," the hologram spoke, her voice carrying an otherworldly echo. "My name is Kim Sora, and I am the leader of the Human Liberation Front. If you are watching this message, it means Ji-hoon has reached his 18th birthday, and the Dominion's conditioning protocols are about to activate." Mina grabbed Ji-hoon's hand instinctively as the woman continued speaking. "I know this will be difficult to accept, but the child you rescued 18 years ago is not entirely human. He is what we call a hybrid, a being created by combining human DNA with genetic material from an alien species known as the Dominion." The hologram flickered, showing images of massive spacecraft hidden in Earth's outer atmosphere. These weren't the sleek, metallic ships from science fiction movies. They were organic-looking vessels that pulsed like living hearts, with surfaces covered in the same geometric patterns that marked Ji-hoon's skin. "The Dominion has been infiltrating our planet for over 50 years, Sora explained as the images shifted to show beings with elongated faces and galaxy-like eyes, the same creatures from Ji-hoon's dreams. They create these hybrids as sleep agents, placing them in human families to grow up undetected until their 18th birthday, when their alien programming activates." Ji-hoon sank onto the couch, his world spinning. "This can't be real. This has to be some kind of joke." But even as he spoke, the markings on his skin were glowing brighter than ever before, responding to the holographic transmission like iron filings to a magnet. The projection showed more images, hundreds of hybrid, children being raised by unsuspecting human families round the world, each one destined to become a weapon in the Dominion's invasion plan. But then the scene changed to show discarded infants, left to die when their conditioning failed. Ji-hoon was supposed to be one of their most powerful agents. Sora continued. But something went wrong during his development. His programming was incomplete, his loyalty circuits damaged. The Dominion considered him defective and ordered his termination. Mina's heart broke as she realized the truth. Her son had been thrown away like garbage, left to die in that alley because he was considered a failed experiment. However, the hologram said, and for the first time, Sora smiled. The Dominion made a critical error. They underestimated the power of human love and compassion, Officer Mina. By rescuing Ji-hoon and raising him with genuine care and affection, you did something they never anticipated. You gave him free will. The images now showed brain scans, comparing normal hybrid neural patterns with Ji-hoon's unique structure. Where other hybrids had rigid, programmed pathways, Ji-hoon's brain showed creative, adaptive thinking patterns that were purely human. Those men in black suits who have been testing him are not government agents, Sora revealed. They are Dominion operatives trying to repair his damaged programming and turn him into the weapon he was. Designed to be, each session was an attempt to override the human emotions and moral values you instilled in him. Suddenly, everything made sense. Ji-hoon's exhaustion after each session, his memory gaps, the way his abilities seemed to dim after visiting with the agents. They had been trying to erase the humanity that Mina had nurtured in him. The reason I'm contacting you now is because tomorrow, on the anniversary of his creation, the Dominion will activate a failsafe protocol. Every hybrid on Earth will receive an irresistible mental command to report to collection points. For final conditioning, even with his damaged programming, Ji-hoon may not be able to resist. The hologram leaned forward urgently. But there is hope, because Ji-hoon has developed genuine human emotions and moral reasoning. He has the potential to do something unprecedented. He can break free from their control entirely and help us save not just himself, but every other hybrid child on the planet. As if on cue, alarms began blaring outside their apartment building. Through the window, they could see strange lights in the sky. Not quite stars, but not aircraft either. The Dominion ships were decloaking, preparing for the final phase of their invasion. The package that brought you this message contains coordinates to our hidden base, Sora said as the hologram began to fade. You have perhaps 6 hours before the conditioning signals become too strong for Ji-hoon to resist. If you want to save your son and help us save humanity, you need to come to us now. The projection disappeared, leaving them in stunned silence. Outside, the strange lights were growing brighter, and Ji-hoon could feel something stirring in his mind. Alien thoughts trying to push aside his human consciousness. "Mom," he whispered, his voice shaking with fear. "I can hear them calling me. They're telling me to come home, and part of me wants to obey." Mina pulled her son close. The same protective instinct that had driven her to save him 18 years ago now blazing even stronger. "You are home," she said firmly. "This is your home. I am your mother, and no alien programming is going to change that." But as the lights in the sky grew brighter and Ji-hoon's markings began to pulse in rhythm with some distant signal, Mina realized that love alone might not be enough this time. They needed help, and they needed it fast. The coordinates in the package led to an abandoned subway tunnel beneath the city. As sirens wailed above them and the first phase of the Dominion invasion began, Mina made the hardest decision of her life. to trust complete strangers with her son's fate. Because the alternative was losing him forever to the aliens who had created him. The underground resistance base was nothing like Ji-hoon had expected. Hidden beneath Seoul's old subway tunnels, it was a sprawling network of converted train cars and maintenance chambers that had been transformed into a high-tech command center. The walls hummed with alien technology that had been captured and repurposed, creating a strange fusion of human ingenuity and Dominion science. Daughters Minna and Ji-hoon descended into the base, following the coordinates from the mysterious package. Ji-hoon felt his world shifting in ways he couldn't explain. The geometric patterns on his skin weren't just glowing anymore. They were practically singing, resonating with frequencies that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Welcome to the last free place on Earth," said Kim Sora, stepping out of the shadows to greet them in person. She looked exactly like a hologram, but in real life, Ji-hoon could see the exhaustion in her eyes and the battle scars on her armor. "I'm sorry we had to meet under these circumstances." The base was filled with people from all walks of life, former soldiers, scientists, teachers, and even children. But what shocked Ji-hoon most was that many of them bore the same geometric markings he did, though theirs were different colors and patterns. "You're not the only hybrid who broke free," Sora explained, noticing his stare over the years. "We've managed to rescue dozens of others whose programming failed or was damaged, each one unique, each one proof that the Dominion's control isn't absolute." As they walked deeper into the base, Ji-hoon began to feel something he'd never experienced before. It was like having a sixth sense suddenly activate. He could detect the presence of every hybrid in the facility, feel their emotions, even catch glimpses of their thoughts. The sensation was overwhelming and exhilarating at the same time. "It's starting," said the voice behind them. Ji-hoon turned to see a man in his 30s with silver markings spiraling up his arms. "Han Dae-ho," he introduced himself with a slight bow, former Dominion tactical hybrid, current pain in their rear end. Dae-ho led them to the base's central command room, where massive screens showed satellite feeds of the planet. Ji-hoon gasped as he saw the scope of what was happening. All around the world, strange structures were rising from the ground, buildings that looked grown rather than built, with the same organic curves as the Dominion ships, collection points. Dae-ho explained grimly, "Every hybrid on Earth is being called to report to these locations for final conditioning. Once that's complete, they'll have an army of super-powered agents ready to take over every major government and military installation simultaneously." On the screens, Ji-hoon could see other young people his age walking toward the collection points with blank expressions, their markings glowing as they responded to the Dominion's mental commands. The sight made his heart ache. These were kids, just like him, raised by loving human families, now being turned into weapons against the very people who had cared for them. "But you're different," Sora said. Watching his reaction, the Dominion designed you to be their ultimate field commander, with the ability to coordinate other hybrids and interface directly with their technology. That's why your powers are so much stronger than the others." As if responding to her words, Ji-hoon suddenly felt his abilities expanding exponentially. He could sense not just the hybrids in the base, but others scattered across the city, across the country, across the entire planet. Their thoughts and emotions flooded his mind like a rushing river. But something else was happening too. As Ji-hoon focused on each hybrid he could sense, he began to feel their humanity, the love they had for their adoptive families, the confusion and fear they were experiencing, the desperate fight between their programmed instincts and their genuine emotions. "I can feel them," he whispered, his eyes widening with realization. "All of them, they're scared, and they don't want to hurt anyone. but they can't stop themselves. That's your real power, said a new voice. A young woman with blue markings approached them, her expression hopeful. I'm Joe Yunji. I was one of the first hybrid Sora's team rescued. When my programming started to break down, it was because I remembered how much my human mother loved me, even when she found out what I was. Yunji explained that each hybrid they had saved had experienced the same thing. Their conditioning could be broken by strong human emotions, particularly love, compassion, and the bonds they had formed with their adoptive families, the Dominion. Made a fatal error, Deho added. They assumed that human emotions were a weakness to be programmed out. They never considered that those emotions might be the key to their entire plan's failure. Jihoon closed his eyes and reached out with his newfound abilities, touching the mind of a hybrid he could sense nearby. She was a girl about his age, walking mechanically toward one of the collection points. But when he connected with her, he didn't try to override her programming with force. Instead, he shared his own memories, Mina's gentle hands caring for him when he was sick, her proud smile at his school performances, the way she had never once made him feel like a freak despite his abilities. The girl stopped walking. A blank expression flickered, and for a moment, Jihoon could feel her remember her own human father, who had taught her to ride a bicycle and read her bedtime stories every night. It's working. Sora breathed, watching the satellite feed. Geez, turning round. But the effort had drained Jihoon significantly. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he realized the magnitude of what they were asking him to do. There were thousands of hybrids round the world, all converging on collection points. Even if he could reach them all, the mental strain might kill him. There has to be another way, Mina said, her maternal instincts kicking in as she saw her son's condition. That's when the beast's alarms started blaring. On the main screen, they could see Dominion ships descending from the upper atmosphere, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. But these weren't just any ships. They were massive motherships, each one capable of housing thousands of warriors. They're accelerating the timeline, Deho reported grimly. The conditioning process is about to begin worldwide. Jihoon felt the change immediately. Every hybrid he could sense suddenly became harder to reach, their minds clouding over as the Dominion's influence grew stronger. The collection points were activating, sending out waves of controlling energy that made his own markings burn with uncomfortable heat. I need to get closer, he said, struggling to his feet despite his exhaustion. If I can reach the main transmission hub, maybe I can disrupt their signal and give the other hybrids a chance to break free through the base's monitoring systems. They located the primary collection point for their region, a massive organic structure that had grown up from the Han River, its tentacle-like appendages reaching toward the sky like a grotesque antenna. That's suicide, Yunji protested. The place will be crawling with Dominion guards and automated defenses. Then we make sure he doesn't go alone, Sora said firmly. This is what we've been preparing for. If Jihoon can break their control over the hybrids, we can turn their own army against them. As the resistance fighters prepared for what might be their final mission, Jihoon felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. For 18 years, he had struggled with feeling different, with not understanding his place in the world. Now, finally, he knew exactly what he was meant to do. The boy who had been discarded as a failed experiment was about to become humanity's greatest hope. And the love that had saved him as an infant would now be the weapon he used to save the world. The mission to the Han River collection point was unlike anything the Resistance had ever attempted. As Jihoon and his team approached the massive organic structure that had erupted from the riverbed, he could feel the mental pressure from thousands of hybrids already under Dominion control. Their synchronized thoughts created a psychic storm that threatened to overwhelm his consciousness. Remember, Sora whispered through their communication devices as they infiltrated the facility's outer defenses. You're not trying to fight their programming with force. You're reminding them who they really are. The collection point was a nightmare of biological technology. Walls pulsed like living tissue, and corridors shifted and moved as if the entire structure was breathing. Captured hybrids stood, imperfect, rose, their eyes blank as Dominion technicians prepared them for final conditioning using machines that looked like metal spiders. Ji-hoon closed his eyes and reached out with his abilities. Not to one hybrid, but to all of them at once. Instead of trying to break their programming, he simply shared his memories, the warmth of Mina's hand on his forehead when he had fever, the pride in her voice when he solved his first math problem, the way she had never flinched when. His markings glowed in the dark. The effect was immediate and incredible. One by one, the conditioned hybrids began to remember their own human families. A girl with green markings suddenly cried out for her adoptive grandmother who taught her to cook. A boy with silver patterns broke free from his restraints, remembering his human father's bedtime stories. But the Dominion wasn't going to give up easily. Alarm systems throughout the facility began shrieking as security drones descended from the ceiling. Mechanical creatures that looked like flying octopi with razor-sharp tentacles. The freed hybrids instinctively moved to protect each other, using their enhanced abilities to fight back against their former captors. This is just the beginning. Han Deo shouted over the chaos as they fought their way deeper into the facility. There are collection points like this on every continent. That's when Ji-hoon made a decision that would change everything. Instead of trying to physically reach each facility, he used the Dominion's own network against them. The organic technology that connected all their installations was designed to coordinate their hyper ID army, but Ji-hoon realized he could use those same connections to spread his message of love and freedom across the entire planet, placing his hands on the facility's central control node. Ji-hoon felt his consciousness expand beyond anything he had ever experienced. Suddenly, he was connected to every hybrid on Earth, feeling their confusion, their fear, and most importantly, their buried humanity. You are not weapons. He projected to all of them simultaneously. You are children who are loved, who are cared for, who have families waiting for you to come home. The response was overwhelming. Across the globe, thousands of hybrids stopped their march to collection points and began to remember in Tokyo. A hybrid named Tanaka Hiroshi broke free from conditioning and destroyed the facility that was processing his fellow captives. In New York, twins with matching star-shaped markings turned against their Dominion handlers to protect the human scientists they had grown up with. But the most incredible moment came when the liberated hybrids didn't just resist their programming. They actively began rescuing other captives, using their enhanced abilities to infiltrate Dominion facilities and free their fellow prisoners. The Dominion's response was swift and terrifying. Massive motherships decloaked all around Earth, their organic hulls bristling with weapons that looked like they had been grown rather than built. These weren't just invasion vessels. They were living creatures the size of cities, with countless smaller ships swarming round them like angry insects. Phase 2, Sora announced grimly as reports flooded in from around the world. Full-scale invasion. The space battle that followed was unlike anything in human history. The freed hybrids, working together with human pilots and resistance fighters, launched captured Dominion vessels alongside modified human aircraft. But they were vastly outnumbered, and the enemy's biotechnology adapted to their attacks almost instantly. That's when Ji-hoon realized the key to victory wasn't superior firepower. It was the one thing the Dominion had never understood. Working with Zhou Yunji and the other freed hybrids, he created a network of shared consciousness that allowed every human and hybrid fighter to coordinate perfectly. Not through cold military efficiency, but through genuine care for each other, human. Pilots risked their lives to save hybrid squad mates they had never met. Freed hybrids used their bodies to shield human vessels from incoming fire. The Dominion's advanced targeting systems couldn't predict actions motivated by love and sacrifice rather than tactical logic. The turning point came when Ji-hoon, piloting a captured Dominion bioship, managed to reach the enemy's command vessel. Instead of trying to destroy it, he opened his mind to the Dominion commanders themselves, showing them what they had created by accident, beings capable of growth, love, and moral choice. The alien commanders, who had spent millennia conquering, through fear and control, were shocked to encounter something their advanced minds couldn't process: the simple concept of unconditional love. Their certainty in their own superiority crumbled when faced with hybrids who chose to protect rather than destroy, who found strength in compassion rather than domination. One by one, the Dominion ships began to withdraw. Their perfect plan had been shattered by the one variable they had never accounted for: the transformative power of human kindness. As the last enemy vessel disappeared into hyperspace, Ji-hoon's bioship landed gently in the courtyard of Seoul General Hospital, the same building where his journey had begun 18 years earlier. Minna was waiting for him, her face streaked with tears of joy and pride. "I watched everything on the news," she said, pulling him into her arms as reporters and cameras surrounded them. "The whole world knows what you did. I just reminded everyone of what you taught me," Ji-hoon replied, his voice shaking with exhaustion and emotion. "That love is stronger than any weapon. And that family isn't about blood. It's about the people who choose to care for each other." Round the world, freed hybrids were reuniting with their human families. And the captured Dominion technology was being studied to help humanity take its next steps into the galaxy. The beings who had been designed as Earth's conquerors had instead become its protectors, and the planet had gained not just victory, but thousands of new heroes who understood that true strength came from the bonds between people who cared for each other. As news crews interviewed the resistance fighters and scientists began examining the abandoned Dominion facilities, Ji-hoon looked up at the stars and smiled. Somewhere out there, other civilizations would learn that Earth was no longer just another world to be conquered. It was a place where love could triumph over any force in the universe. The baby who had been thrown away as garbage had grown up to save not just humanity, but to teach the galaxy itself a lesson about the power of compassion. And it all started with one police officer who refused to walk away from a child in need. The end.